Hello and welcome to this really special session that we've put on today just for you. This is a webinar that we have provided for nurses who are aiming to register to work in the UK through the Nursing and Midwifery Council, and to be employed by an NHS trust. So we're hosting this webinar live on our Facebook and YouTube channels, and it's great to see a good number of you joining already. Hello also to the nurses who are watching this as a recording after the live webinar ends. We hope everyone joining either live or later on find this a really useful session. As you listen to the speakers that we have for you in today's session, you're welcome to ask questions by typing them into the event comment box. We'll collate those questions as they come through, and we've allocated time at the end of the session to ask our speakers so that you can get a live answer. But let's get started with the session itself. So, are you hoping to become a registered nurse in the UK? Do you feel you clearly understand how to meet the English language requirements to be able to register as a nurse in the UK? As an internationally educated nurse, midwife, or nursing associate trained outside the UK, you'll be aware that there are now alternative ways to prove your English to the UK's Nursing and Midwifery Council, the NMC, including the new SIFE pathway, which some of you may have heard pronounced SIF. SIFE stands for Supporting Information from Employers. And in this session, we'll outline the role OET and SIFE play in helping you achieve your dreams of living and working in the UK, along with the differences between the two pathways. So joining me in the discussion today, and we're very grateful for them giving them time, are Trish Spruce from Yeovil Hospital Healthcare, and Nadia Falou, who is Stakeholder Relations and Partnerships Officer from OET. Nadia is also an experienced English language teacher and OET expert. And they're going to share fresh perspectives on the options available and the importance of making the right choice for your future nursing career. So before we compare the two pathways, Trish, could you please give us some background on your trust?
Hi there, and thank you, Rebecca. Yes, so I am part of Yeovil International Recruitment. We are part of the NHS of Somerset Foundation Trust. We have recruited over 3,000 nurses to the UK across various trusts that we work with, and probably about 500 allied healthcare professionals. Throughout that journey, we offer support on their English language, and this is why we're talking about this today, because OET is something that we recommend highly for all healthcare professionals. And we have lots of opportunities in the UK, up and down across England and Scotland for healthcare professionals to join us. So we've been working in this field for a long time. We've seen lots of changes with the English language requirement over the years as well, with different regulations that have come in with the NMC. So it's really good today to get that out there and have a chat about it and just answer some questions live. So thank you, Rebecca.
And thanks, Trish, for that introduction. And I'm sure all the nurses listening are really excited to have the opportunity to speak to someone who actually works for the NHS and to hear their perspectives. So let's start off by asking about what is SIFE and who does it apply to?
Yes, so SIFE was a new avenue introduced by the NMC. It was designed for individuals that have been educated overseas, who have been nurses in their home countries, but have been working in the UK for a number of years, maybe in healthcare professional roles, so as healthcare assistants or nursing assistants as they're known overseas. And they've not been able to get through the English language requirements. So there was a real recognition that some individuals had worked for the trust. We've had people ourselves that have worked for us for 10 years and they've never gone through the English language requirement, completely competent in their English. And this was a route for them to be able to satisfy that need and move on to be a registered nurse in the UK. It is really only for people that are already in the UK, and you must have been in the UK for a minimum of 12 months. And you must be supported by your employer to move on to that in that process. You've also must have previously taken an OET previously, so we can determine the level of English that you have in the workplace. So yes, it was a new route to kind of try and help those people on the journey to becoming a registered nurse.
That's really interesting, and I think there's a lot of nurses that are probably quite interested in this idea of SIFE, but as you said, it's really for nurses that are in the UK already. So, what are your thoughts on the SIFE option for the nurses that are perhaps joining us live today, who are qualified but still overseas and not already living and working in the UK?
So it's really important, if you're not already in the UK, that you follow the NMC journey as the standard process for overseas, and that is taking your OET test and meeting those minimum requirements. Which is, now you're going to test me live here. I've got myself in a little hole here of where I'm going to say, right, so writing is C+, reading, speaking and listening is B. So that is the minimum requirements for the NMC. And do that process. It is really good to invest your time and training to get that OET requirement, and then you're on the right journey to come to the UK and become a registered nurse really quickly once you're in the UK. To use a SIFE, you would have to come over to the UK as a healthcare support worker or a nursing assistant, which is an unregistered role. So you're not putting all those nursing skills into practice in the UK, and that would be a very long journey to be there, you then to become registered. So my advice is you follow the journey, you take your OET and you try and pass that OET in your home countries or wherever you're living at the moment. And we've had 3,000 nurses that have already done it. So it can be done. It is just time and commitment to pass your English.
That's a really great number.
Oh, Rebecca, we think we've lost your sound. Oh no, I think. Oh, oh no, we've lost Rebecca. Oh, back in the room. Rebecca, you're back on mute.
Let's try that again. Is that better?
Yes. Gosh. Technical glitches always happen.
Yes, that must have sent you into a panic, though, the idea that the host has just dropped off. Apologies.
Don't worry, I've got through it.
I'm going to bring Nadia in now, and to talk about how the employer part of the SIFE aspect takes part. Nadia.
Thank you so much. So yes, when it comes to the SIFE route, the responsibility to validate is with your employer. So they have specific and detailed guidelines and processes that they must follow for the submission. So when you're working in the UK, your line manager, who would send the necessary information from the employer, needs to be registered with the NMC. And this employer needs to hold a position at the level of NHS Band 6 or higher, or an equivalent if they're in a position outside of the NHS. The NMC can consider information from up to 2 line managers as long as they are registered with the NMC, and that is really important. And what's also important is they need to have been your managers for at least 6 months, so whilst you're here in the UK. And these managers must confirm that they are familiar with your English skills through the NMC's online procedure. So once you've got that and you've got your manager to sign everything off for you, they then have to go through an additional check. So another validation has to be provided by another NMC registrant who is holding a position at NHS Band 8. It's called 8A or higher, so it's a more senior role within the NHS, or it needs to be an equivalent if you're in a role outside of the NHS. And this additional signature ensures that the process has been consistent. So that's how it all works. So it's not straightforward. You have to be in a role for 12 months or more, and during that time, that first manager needs to have worked with you for a period of 6 months or more. They will sign it off, and then it has to go to another manager at Band 8, and they have to agree to sign you off.
And having done that process, Nadia, is it then like OET where you get your results and you can then automatically go and register for the NMC registration? If you've got those signatures, is it similar? It's an automatic process to registration?
No, and that's a really important question. It's not. So even if you complete your employment for a year and your employer agrees to sign you off for SIFE, the acceptance is not guaranteed. So the NMC considers the employer provided information carefully, but they might choose not to accept it. Also, I think what's important to point out is that even if you work with an employer for 12 months or more, they are not under any obligation to sign off the SIFE form. So the English language level is there for patient safety, and that is the most important thing. So you still have to demonstrate to your employer that you have the level that the NMC are requiring with OET, but they have to be able to see that and agree that they can see you at that level. And if they have any doubts about it, they can't sign you off, because obviously patient safety is the most important thing, and the English language and having that level is fundamental to their safety and quality care. So it's absolutely not guaranteed. It's not guaranteed by the NMC, but it's also not guaranteed by the employer. And if they choose not to do it, that is their decision, and it is final.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Thanks, Nadia, for making that distinction. So in summary, having looked at the SIFE pathway, which is option 1, if you're not already living and working in the UK in an unregistered role with a UK employer, getting NMC registration through SIFE may involve a really long detour to achieving your dreams of living and working in the UK. And the outcome, as Nadia's just mentioned, isn't guaranteed either. In comparison, OET offers a comprehensive solution that requires none of that employer input associated with SIFE, and opting to prepare for and take an English language test can eliminate any of that uncertainty that we've just been discussing about whether your application will be accepted or not. But it also offers you numerous advantages for a long and happy career in the UK as part of the NHS, because your OET results are accepted for registration, for immigration, and also it's going to have really good support for your education of the types of language you're going to need to use as part of your new role. So let's ask Trish and Nadia for your views on the OET option. So Nadia, starting with you, perhaps.
Absolutely. So I think one of the great things about taking the OET is that you know that your acceptance is guaranteed, and that is the most important thing. So the NMC acknowledges OET as the only English language test specifically for healthcare professionals. So there's a couple of things in that. Number one, you're going to know that your results are going to be accepted by the NMC for your registration. But the other great benefit is when you're preparing for OET, you're actually building the language skills that you're going to need to use day to day in your job. So it's absolutely a win-win situation. So that you have those clinical communication skills, you've practiced them, and using English in a healthcare context. And again, it's all coming back to the type of text you'll come into contact with, the conversations that you'll have in the workplace. You'll become familiar with that as you prepare for OET. Another thing that is worth remembering is that SIFE wasn't the only change this year. So The NMC also changed the clubbing rules. So this is really exciting for candidates. So there's now more scope for you to combine your scores from different tests. So if you're on the call and you've done OET before, in the past, it used to be a period of 6 months that you had to combine your scores. This has now been extended to 12 months. So you've got a longer period of time to club your scores together. And if you're not sure if you can club your scores, if you go to the NMC website, they've actually got a calculator to see if you can do it. So I definitely recommend go to that website and have a look to see if you can put your scores together. And again, this comes back to, if you're doing OET, even if you don't get that result first time and you do get it the second time, or you're in a position to club those results, your OET is going to be accepted, and you don't need to worry about coming over, working with somebody in a different role for that, like we were talking about before, the period of 6 months with one employer and finding somebody to sign you off. You've got your OET, so it's all good.
Thanks, Nadia. And Trish, what's your perspective? You mentioned a little earlier, but if you'd like to go into more detail about the OET option.
Yeah, just going on from that, we have people in our trust that are going through SIFE, and I can hand on heart say it's such a complicated process. Don't forget, you need to have the evidence for the NMC that you've been taught in English, so all your transcripts from your training, which is really complicated to get sometimes if you qualified, a number of years ago. So it's a really complicated process. In terms of the OET, exactly what Nadia says, you're on the right route to become a nurse in the UK. There's no question about that. It's the right route to go down. It's very quick. So from the moment that you pass your OET, we can usually deploy someone to the UK within 3 or 4 months. And then as soon as you arrive in the UK, you're undertaking your OSCE training and your OSCE pass within 3 months, and you're getting your NMC registration. There is absolutely no question about that route. The OET, we have seen the evidence that there is a much higher success rate than IELTS of using the OET. And that is because the questions all are around nursing and healthcare. So you understand the questions, you know what they're talking about. There's no confusion with the questions. They're really clear, which is half the battle of answering of taking a test. You're trying to answer a question, you know the answer because you're nurses. So it's how you articulate your answer. So we always recommend people take their OET because usually, on average, it takes 2 tests to club together. Like Nadia says, the clubbing is much easier now, and we've seen a lot more success at using those clubbing scores now. So 100%, we would always recommend the OET.
Thanks, Trish. And Nadia, following on from what Trish has just said, how does OET prepare candidates for work? How is the test, designed to help them get ready for work?
It is honestly, every single part of the test is designed with the candidate in mind and what they need to do in their job. And the test itself is designed with subject matter experts. So it goes through so many checks before it's actually released, so that you know that what you're being tested on has actually come from experts within the healthcare field, which is so important to check that it is all relevant. So you'll be gaining language skills for everyday nursing tasks that you'll come across. So, for example, let's look at the listening part A. You listen to 2 recordings and they're consultations. So, for example, between a patient and a healthcare professional. And during that part of the test, you have to complete the notes just as you would in your job. In the reading section, you might have to look for example, an extract from a manual for a device that you have to use in the workplace. So it's checking you can understand the information in that text clearly. And again, it all comes back to patient safety. So if you have to use that device with a patient, making sure you've understood what the information is provided and that you can follow it clearly so that when you're actually using it, you're using it correctly. For the speaking, I'm a huge fan of the speaking test, I have to say, but normally in a language test, you do an interview, and you might talk about general topics or a topic that you might not be familiar with. But at OET, we ask you to be yourself as a healthcare professional. So as nurses, you take the role of a nurse and you do the speaking test, not with the examiner, but with an interlocutor. And the interlocutor is there to do the role play with you. And the interlocutor could be a patient, a relative, or a carer. And you have role play cards, but the purpose of it is to demonstrate your communication skills as a nurse. So we're assessing your English language, so how accurate you are, how correct the information is, but we're also looking at clinical communication skills. So how well you give information, how well you get information. Did you show empathy to the person you're speaking to? And what's wonderful is when you're actually preparing for OET, for the speaking test, you're actually building your skills for your OSCE as well. So it's a really good stepping stone for when you're going on to your OSCE, that you're actually building those skills up. And finally, for the writing, usually in a language test, my background is in languages, so I've had to do a number of language tests in my lifetime as well. But usually you'd sit down and you'd write an essay, and it might be on a topic that you're not really familiar with, or you know a little bit about it. In OET, we want it to be work relevant. So you have the case notes and you have a task, and your job is to use those case notes. And it might be, for example, writing a referral letter. And again, it's coming back to patient safety. So can you communicate the important information and find the key information that your reader needs from those case notes, so that when the patient is transferred to a different hospital, for example, the healthcare professional there has all the information they need. They can understand it quickly, concisely, but most importantly, accurately for patient safety when they've moved hospitals.
Fantastic. Thanks, Nadia, for that insight into all the different parts of the test and how it really gets you ready for the workplace. And I can see Trish nodding along to a lot of that and the relevance. So thinking now about the second pathway, the OET pathway, for nurses who haven't yet migrated to the UK, which I'm imagining a lot of you on today's webinar are still overseas and thinking about your options. So if you're still overseas, when it comes to pursuing your dream of a satisfying and successful nursing career in the UK, OET is still your best choice. As we've heard from Trish and Nadia, your OET results offer you compliance with the visa requirements, greater financial stability. You'll be going straight into a registered position, diverse job prospects among the various NHS trusts in the UK, more confidence in your clinical communication, and prepares you for excellence in your role, being able to communicate with both patients and colleagues, and opening those doors, as we've said, to a really successful career. So today's session is all about really choosing the pathway that's best for you. And we've had a number of questions. I've been monitoring the questions coming in through the session, and we've got a good amount of time now to answer some of those questions. And we're also thrilled to be joined by Natasha Dare from the NMC. So maybe, Natasha, I'll ask you to unmute and to turn your camera on. So we've got Natasha from the NMC, Trish and Nadia, as you've been hearing during the session, who are all able to answer questions. So I will make a start and try and direct the question. I'll put them up on the screen, but direct the question to the person who I think is best able to join. So, and there may be a number of you answering a couple of these questions. So this first question coming through from Mohammed is saying, what's next after OET? So perhaps, Natasha, I'll go to you firstly with that. Someone's got their English requirement. What do they do next?
Hello, and thank you to everyone. It's been a really, really interesting session so far, and great to see how the NMC's requirements are kind of coming into practice. It's always really nice for us to see that. So after someone has passed OET, firstly, congratulations. But that's only one of the NMC's requirements for registering with us. So there nursing or midwifery, and the majority of people who trained outside the UK will then need to pass our test of competence, which is a written examination and then a clinical structured examination in the UK. You also have to have evidence of appropriate indemnity, so insurance for the practice that you'll be doing when you are actually in the UK. And you have to meet our health and character requirements. So that includes collecting up a few kind of background references, medical references and the like. We then have an online application process that you'll need to complete. We then check the evidence that you've given to us, and providing that you tick all our boxes, the last step is paying we think, very modest fee to join our register. And then you will get your NMC PIN and you are away to practice.
Fantastic. Thank you for that outline. And we'll perhaps try and post the link in case anyone's not familiar with where they go to start that registration process into the chat, so that those that are watching today or after today's session will be able to go directly to your site to see that. Yes, Trish, go ahead.
Yes, I didn't know how to put my hand up electronically, so I'll put my real hand up. Can I also say as well, we do know that there is different, you don't need to, we see candidates who take their CBT before they take their English test. Can I just say, do not do that, because you cannot get on the register without your OET. It's the most difficult part of the whole process, the English language test is, because it's really your investment in training and time to get through those requirements. So don't waste money on any other test. Do your English test first, because most trusts, when you've been offered a job and accepted with them, will pay for the other steps of the process. So the first commitment from you is to pass your OET. The rest the trust will probably support you with on the next routes. So it's really key to get that across. Thank you.
Thanks, Trish. And that's great news to hear, that there's funding available for those parts of the test as well. Everyone likes that kind of news. So a great thing to know about. And I think this question's also for you, Trish. Mian on Facebook is saying, what's the process to join you if someone's interested in working for Yeovil?
I think my colleague has been posting in the chat, so I know she's online. So what we'll do is we'll post our website link. You can go in onto our website. You can apply direct to us. We're always looking for experienced nurses with acute inpatient experience or mental health experience nurses. So yes, just apply via our website and someone will be in touch with you really quickly.
That's lovely. Thanks, Trish. Nadia, I'll ask you this question to start off with, but Natasha or Trish might have some questions or input as well. So Thelini on YouTube hasn't quite met the NMC requirements. They've done very, very well. They've got a B for writing, listening and reading. Unfortunately, not quite the B grade for speaking. So writing could have been a C+ to meet the NMC requirements, but speaking does need to be a B. What happens in this case, Nadia?
Well, first of all, well done on getting really good scores. In this case, you do need to retake all of the modules again. And Natasha will also probably jump in on this one, because it is the requirement of the NMC. So you can't just do an individual skill retake. You have to redo all 4 modules on the same day in the same session. And then if you're speaking, fingers crossed, I mean, you're very close, it's 350. Hopefully that time you'll get the grade B, and then you'll be able to look to club the results together.
Thanks, Nadia. And yes, Natasha, would you like to explain about what our candidates call clubbing, which means the combination of the test results?
Yes, what we've called test combining. Probably sounds a bit less violent. But
I think
no,
it's
so
advanced clubbing.
So you have up to 12 months to combine the results from your 2 test sittings. And you have to meet our required scores across the 2 test sittings, but there are also minimum scores you have to get. So when you are combining test scores, we don't want anyone to fall too far below our required score in any sitting either. It's a little complicated to explain in person for individual circumstances. So I was very pleased to hear the recommendation to look at our test score calculator that's on our website, where you can put your individual scores in and it'll tell you whether we will accept your combined scores or not. But it's worth noting, of course, that now with the introduction of this new SIFE option, if you just miss one of our scores on one module, that's when you could use SIFE if it applies to your situation. Our test score calculator will tell you that as well.
Lovely, thank you very much.
Can I
yes,
just reiterate there, though, SIFE is really only applicable for somebody that's already in the UK, not to confuse with candidates coming from overseas. I did notice that there was the other English language tests are allowing a single resit now, so it'd be something to consider in the future. I'm just putting that live out there, that at any point in the future, if the NMC changed and looked at a single resit, that would be really great for candidates. But at the moment, the NMC requirement is the whole test needs to be resat, and your one score that's falling below the required score needs to reach that B or C+. But also it's really important that no other score drops below 0.5 or the test will be void. You won't be able to use it. So you still have to consistently get that high score for that for be able to club it.
That's a really good point as well. So if you are in a position such as this example where you need to resit, sometimes what happens is that if you're preparing for your next test, what some candidates do is they focus on the one that they didn't quite get the score in, and they don't practice the others. So it's really important that you continue to practice all of the skills, because unfortunately what sometimes happens when you do the resit, so for example with this example, the speaking you'd get the grade, but then you might find that actually the reading, the listening or the writing dropped. So you want to keep them all at the same level. So when you're preparing for a resit, if you ever find yourself in this situation, it's good to know the area you need to work on, but make sure you also still prepare for those other papers. Again, just remind yourself, just do some refreshers, some sample tests off our website, just so that when you go in on test day, it will minimize that risk of you dropping in one of the other papers.
Yeah, we see it quite a lot, and it's absolutely heartbreaking that they can't club. But so yes, please keep going on it, and put your effort into all of them, all sections. But yeah, because it's really, I know it's demoralizing when you another section's fallen below the requirement, and then you've got retake again. But just don't give up.
Absolutely. And just something to add on that, remember when you're preparing for OET, you're not just preparing for an English language exam, you're preparing for English in the workplace. So always keep that in mind. Yes, you're going to be building your skills and strategies to deal with the timing and making sure you can complete your questions in time. That's really important for performance on test day. But the skills you're building up, you're going to take with you when you're working in the NHS. So it's all worthwhile.
Thanks, everyone, for all of those thoughts on that question. We've had a few questions relating to nursing associates. So I don't know, Trish or Natasha, whether you want to respond to this one, but just briefly, perhaps, because it's not really the scope of this webinar, but if someone is looking for a nursing associate role, could you let us know the details for that?
Yes, so midwives, just going on to the midwives, is exactly the same. So the requirement are the same, and the nursing associates is the same as well. I must stress, if you are a registered nurse in the UK, do not go down the nursing association route. Go down the full registration route, because that is a different role in the UK. So there's no quick win with your English language requirement. There's no quick fix. It's a requirement that is all based around patient safety and communication in the workplace. So in any role that you have in the UK, it's key. So if you're a registered nurse, apply for the nursing registration. Don't apply for a different registration, because the role is completely different in the UK. So I just want to put that out there. We have had nurses that have gone down the nursing association route, and then we've had to swap their registration mid through the process, which is really complicated, and get them on the right registration route. So yes, if you're a registered nurse in your home country, you can be a registered nurse in the UK.
Thank you. That sounds straightforward. There's also been a couple of questions around, which I know are not specifically your area of involvement, but around red lists for different countries where the UK is not able to actively recruit from. Is there anywhere we can direct participants about how they can find which countries are on those red lists?
Yes, if you go to the World Health Organization list and type in if you Google WHO red list, it will give you a list of restricted countries that we cannot recruit from. Now, that is where agencies are recruiting from. So agencies are not allowed to recruit from those countries. You can apply directly to trusts via the NHS jobs website or wherever you see the advert. But there is a restriction on the numbers that can come into the UK, and it's a government agreement. It's nothing that we can do about that, and I wish we could influence things, but we can't. It's just a list that we have to abide by.
Great, thanks, Trish. This question from Basia, who's a nurse in Poland. She's looking for work at the moment as a nurse in the UK, going through registration with the NMC. She lives in England, has the right to work, but she's struggling to find a hospital who wants to employ her. That sounds very unlikely, but perhaps there's others like Basia in a similar situation. What's the process for starting, or where is the best place to look if someone is trying to find work in the UK and seems to meet all of the requirements?
Yeah, so I don't know the individual's requirements. Has this individual passed their OET? Are they on the journey of the NMC, or have they started the CBT and not passed their OET? So it can vary quite a bit. What I would say is NHS Jobs has all vacancies in the UK for all trusts. If you want to drop us an email, we can certainly have a look at your CV, and then we can give you the best advice of where you perhaps need to be directed to. And we may have even a position ourselves. So just drop us an email or go onto our website and we'll have a look at your CV. It's best to have an individual review of experience.
Absolutely. And we, as you say, we can't talk about individual circumstances, but certainly that's the good place. NHS Jobs is a good place to go to start looking for work. Another quick question, perhaps for Natasha. Dilkahara is saying, are there any age restrictions from the NMC about how old nurses can be to apply for work in the UK?
There aren't, no, not from a regulatory perspective. I mean, employers might have their own requirements, but no, we don't have any age upper limit. Lower limit is obviously affected by you gaining an appropriate qualification, and you can only be so young to do that. But no, that's it.
That's great. And maybe Trish, from your experience, are you seeing a full range of ages applying?
Oh, absolutely. So we see people that have just got 12 months experience, have consolidated their training and then come over to the UK. We've seen people with families come over to the UK. There's no age restriction. As long as you're fit and healthy to work, that's it. Great.
Fantastic. Nadia, I'll ask this one for you. We've obviously got some midwives joining us live in today's session, which is lovely. Is OET suitable for midwives?
Absolutely. So the OET for nursing test is suitable for nurses and midwives. So have a look at, if you go to oet.com, you can have a look at some sample papers as well if you want to see the kind of content that you'll come across in the test.
That's right. And I think we pride ourselves that OET really focuses on the expression sometimes uses cradle to grave. So we go through the full range of patient experiences, and it means that in the speaking test, in the listening test, in any of the tests, in fact, reading and writing, the context might be a midwifery context. And certainly in the speaking and writing sections, which are specific to the profession, there could definitely be midwifery context being used there.
Absolutely.
All right. Next question. Alan is asking, Natasha, perhaps you could just again remind us of the requirements for OET. I assume Alan's asking for the scores that the NMC require, and perhaps again that clubbing combination of score requirements.
No, I'm going to have to confess, I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but the letters are...
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, the letters, okay, fine, are that you need so across the 4 language domains, you need a B in reading, in speaking, and in listening, but in writing, you need a C+. Now, that's the overall requirement. In terms of combining, you effectively have 2 shots to get and meet those requirements. So you can meet those requirements across 2 tests where you combine the scores within 12 months of each other. But as we've mentioned, there are also minimum scores. So you can't be more than half a score below the required score in any test. So as we've been discussing, you do need to make sure you can kind of keep your standards up across the 2 tests when you're combining the scores. So it's worth paying attention to all 4 language domains in every score, even if you just miss the requirement in one domain in the first time round. So we're always testing the breadth of your language knowledge across both of those tests. So that you don't have to remember what I've said, I strongly suggest everyone have a look at the NMC's website where all of these details are set out so that, you know, you don't, again, unlike me, if you can't remember the numbers that are associated with the letters, you can always find them there.
That's lovely. And yes, to help you out, it's a 350 is a B and a 300 is a C+. And the tests in that 12-month period, correct me if I'm wrong, but they don't have to be consecutive. So it could be that you've taken a test that meets some of those requirements. Maybe your next test, unfortunately, wasn't an improvement, but then the 3rd test maybe meets those requirements. So my understanding is this, provided it's within that 12-month period, any of the test results that you take, if they combine together to meet the NMC requirements, would be acceptable. Yes,
you have 2 test sittings to combine them. So if you took 3 tests, all within 12 months, and the test in the middle didn't meet our requirements, effectively don't tell us about it. You can tell us about the 1st and 3rd, provided that they're within the 12-month period. So you can't combine your scores across 3 tests, but you can have as many attempts as you need to be able to tell us about the 2 tests in which you do actually meet the required scores.
That's right. And how you tell the NMC is through OET. So on the OET website, we have what's called a verification portal. So once you have the results, the successful results that you need to submit to the NMC, you will share those individual results. You don't share all of your results. If you have got more than 2, you share the ones that the NMC will recognize. They then have that secure knowledge that they've come from OET. They know that those results have been verified by us, and that's the way that those results get shared. So it's done very securely and safely from every angle, from our angle, from the NMC's angle, and from you as a candidate.
And that's so important as well. Just to reiterate to candidates, you have the control of who you share your results with. So you log into your portal and you can share them with who you want. So scores are not automatically shared. You control which ones you do share. So just like Natasha was just saying, if you did take one and it wasn't quite right, you don't need to share it. You control which ones you share with which trust and which regulator.
Fantastic. And I've just found the link to the NMC requirement registration page. So I've posted that into the comments now so that those of you who are looking to go onto that after today's session can do so. All right. Yes, Trish, go ahead.
Yeah, there's two questions that have come up that I've just been keeping my eye on that are
Sure.
really important to answer. And I didn't want to miss them, just while they were fresh in my mind. So the first thing is around recruitment from the Philippines. We hear lots of rumours that go around the international community that the UK is stopping recruitment, that the restrictions are in recruitment in the Philippines and India and different things like that. There is no restrictions planned for any of those green list countries. So recruitment will continue internationally into the UK. So if you hear of any rumours, just check that WHO list and you'll see where recruitment can continue and where has to be restricted. So don't believe everything you read on social media, apart from unless you're on an official site like us. And there was another question in there around minimum requirements for OETs for healthcare professionals. Healthcare assistants. So nursing assistants and HCAs. There isn't a minimum requirement for to work as a HCA. However, that might be implemented by the trust. So as an organisation, if we were to recruit from overseas, which we are not at the moment for HCAs, we would have a minimum requirement of 5.5 on an OET or another English language test. But there is no standard requirement like there is with the NMC, because that's a registered profession. For a healthcare assistant, there isn't a registered profession that governs that workforce. So it would be on a trust by trust basis. So you just need to be clear. Understand from when the employer that you're applying for what their requirement would be. Can I just reiterate though, as we discussed before, if you are a nurse, come over as a nurse. Get that requirement to be registered as a UK RN. There is no shortcut. If you come over as a HCA, you're going to be working as a HCA for probably 2 years before you get your registration. So there is no shortcut.
And just on that as well, for anybody who might have thought about that route, it's really important to look at the salary difference as well. The cost of living in the UK, I'm based in the UK, it is high and it does continue to go up. And you might find that it's actually more challenging on an HCA salary, that especially compared to what you'd be earning as a nurse. So do take that into consideration as well.
Thanks, Nadia. I think a couple of quite quick questions to answer. Mariam is asking, and maybe this is one for you, Natasha, how many years, I assume Mariam is meaning how many years after successfully achieving OET results would they be accepted by the NMC?
Up to 2 years.
Thank you. And then another question, sort of similar, but Esther, and maybe this one's for you, Trish. So Esther left her registered nurse job 5 years ago. It's looking to pass OET, but I think is worried perhaps with that gap in employment. Would you still consider her application?
It does depend on the employer that you're applying for. For our requirements, no, that is too much of a gap. And the reason being is when you come into the UK, you have to take your practical exam, your OSCE. So your clinical skills need to be up to date to pass that exam, because it is a really difficult exam and it's a practical exam. So you need to make sure all your clinical practice is up to date before you come in over to the UK. So we don't accept a gap over 3 years. So what I would suggest is while you're studying for your OET, try and get back into some clinical practice in a hospital, and then during that time that you're studying for your OET, you've got your clinical skills back up to date as well.
Lovely, thank you. I think you answered this question, Trish, just briefly, but let's bring it up on the screen. Vishwas is saying, I'm a newly graduated nurse. Am I able to join NHS, as he's describing, as a fresher, somebody new?
Yes, we do recruit freshers into mental health, into mental health posts, because we recognise that there's a lot of training that's needed in the UK once you arrive. So we are prepared for that training. But most organisations, most trusts in the UK ask for a minimum of at least 6 months. We ask for 12 months post-registration experience. And the reason for that is we want to consolidate your nursing education into practice before you come into the UK ready to take your OSCE.
Lovely, thank you. There's been a few questions coming through from candidates who are obviously working on their OET skills at the moment, and I've put into the chat the link to our Learn pages, which is the best starting place to find out more about the test. We've got lots of resources in there to help you work out where your strengths and weaknesses are and to work on those. Nadia, this question from Dahlia on Facebook is saying she did OET Pulse recently. She got a C1. Now, C1 is another code. Essentially, we've been talking about B grades. We've been talking about 350s. C1 relates to CEFR. But can you sort of explain what that result from Pulse means?
Absolutely. And it's great that you have done the Pulse test. So for those of you who don't know, OET Pulse is a benchmarking test or a level test. So if you're thinking about doing OET, but you don't know how much time you need to prepare or what your level is now to get to the level required by the NMC, you can go to our website and you can take OET Pulse. It's an online test. You can do it anywhere at any time, but it's just to find out what your level is. And the score that you get at the end is benchmark to what's called the CEFR or the CEFR, the Common European Framework of Reference. So there are 6 levels on the CEFR. I won't go into everyone in detail, but the NMC, when they are asking you for a grade B, they are asking you for a CEFR level C1, which is advanced level of English. So by doing the Pulse test, you can see where your level is. It's great you've come out at C1. So what I'd say that means is that go to our website, do some sample tests, become familiar with the test, what questions you're going to be asked. If you can, print off some of the sample papers as well if you're looking to do OET on paper, and see if you can do it in the time. So time yourself to get used to those timings. We also have sample papers for OET on computer. So if you're looking to do the computer-based test, you can do that. And wish you the very, very best of luck with your OET test.
Thanks, Nadia. That's good explanation. This question coming from Beatrice, I think again, Trish, you already answered, but perhaps if you could just go again. So do registered nurses need to do the OSCE?
Yes, absolutely. The route to registration for the NMC, it is all on their website and it's really clear on their website. So it's OET first. Then you apply for your NMC application and you have to upload lots of documents there around your registration, qualification, fitness to practice, lots of different things. But there's a step-by-step guide. You're then invited to take your first competency test, your CBT, which is again online, done in country. Once you've completed your OET and CBT, you're ready to deploy to the UK. Your visa will all be processed and flights and all that will be arranged for you. Then once you arrive in the UK, you undertake your OSCE, and then there's a final verification process with the NMC to verify all your documents that you've submitted, and then you pay your final registration fee, and then you get your PIN. It sounds so simple.
I was just hearing about they pay for your flights to the UK, and I was thinking, well, that sounds a great option. Having just come over from Australia and paying for my own flights, it's that sounds really effective.
That is the difference of going through the nursing route and the HCA route. For the nursing, there is a whole package of support for people to come to the UK. Lots of financial support, lots of training, induction to get you up and running as a UK nurse. For HCA or nursing assistant, that package will not be the same. It will be much lower and a lot of your costs will need to be self-funded.
And then on top of that, it's not a guaranteed route as well, like we were saying before. So you could come over as an HCA, work with an employer for 12 months, and then they might not be able to sign you off anyway. So there's a lot of risk with that route.
Thanks, Nadia. So we've got time, I think, just for a couple more questions. Natasha, this one's for you. Milanka is saying, given what we have said about SIFE not being really suitable for overseas nurses who are still overseas at the moment, but perhaps Milanka is already meeting those requirements for SIFE, where do you find details for that on the NMC website?
Well, you've answered the question for me. It's everything's on the NMC website. If you follow through from the link that you kindly circulated, you'll find details of the SIFE option. But it's worth restating, it's not an individual route to registration. It's supplementary. So it's for people who are in the UK who are really struggling to pass language tests but who've just missed the scores, or for people who have trained in English but in a non-majority English speaking country. So it's really a way of helping people who have been sort of stuck in the UK in a health and care role that doesn't quite match what they were hoping to achieve. So it's really for those people. It's relatively limited use, and so a lot of people won't be eligible to use it or won't need to use it. If you've already achieved the right scores on OET, then there's no need for you to even consider doing this. But it is built into our online application process. So if it is something that you think you might need to take advantage of, when you answer the questions on the NMC's application process online, it'll direct you towards SIFE if it's appropriate for you. But do have a look. We've put a lot of frequently asked questions and a lot of background information, because this is a new option, onto our website. Go and have a look and see whether this is actually appropriate for you and your circumstances.
Thank you. And I think that's a really good place to perhaps start wrapping up today's session. I think we've heard the two options that are now available to nurses coming into the UK for work. The option for SIFE, which, as Natasha's just mentioned, is really only for those who are currently living and working in the UK already. The OET option, which remains the strongest option if you are still overseas and needing to provide an English requirement. As we've heard from Trish, it also recognises, it respects the qualifications you've already achieved and you're already working as a nurse, and it allows you to come straight into the UK in a similar role as well. So I'm posting into the chat now a link to our free study guide for those of you who are preparing for OET or starting to think about preparing for OET. This is a really useful resource to help you make the most of that preparation time. But I'd like to thank all of our participants for giving their time today and their expert opinions. I know I found it really interesting. I know all of the candidates who've been joining us online have also found it really interesting. So Trish, thank you very much to you. Natasha, thank you for joining as well. And Nadia for your insights from OET. I will just mention we're running another session similar to this one, joined by Tracy and from the Devon Alliance for International Recruitment. So a different NHS trust, but we'll have similar perspectives, I'm sure, to Trish. We're running that session next Thursday. So if you missed the start of this session, you'd like to hear from another perspective from a trust in the UK, then please do join us for that session next week. But any final comments, Natasha, Trish, Nadia, from yourselves before we sign off?
I just want to wish everyone good luck with their OETs. And like I keep saying, don't give up. Thousands of nurses have come through this route to the UK. So it is just about committing some time and dedication to get through that exam. Good luck.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So we'll finish there for today, and we'll see some of you in the session next week. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.